live to Nationals MP Keith Pitt, who is joining us from Adelaide. Thank you for your time, Keith. Now, can we just get your reaction firstly to that story that Trudy was just talking about before, about the Australian involvement with this inquiry into impeachment? Do you think the Prime Minister should be more forthcoming with exactly what assistance we've offered?
Well, statements have been made by the Foreign Minister and others that we are ready to assist and cooperate with the United States, and certainly that will be the position. But I agree 100% with Marise Payne. We certainly don't go around distributing what comes from our communication systems, which are incredibly secure and contain a lot of highly confidential information. So Marise Payne is spot on with her comments. That is the government's position.
So you don't think, even if it is pertinent to saying that there was any kind of Australian influence that could have been really untoward, that we should be putting that forward?
Well, I don't think it adds anything to what the US is looking at in terms of their own investigation. We've said that we will assist and cooperate, and that's what we'll do.
Now, if we turn to exactly why you're in Adelaide, we know we're usually talking to you from regional Queensland, but you're there for the nuclear inquiry. Exactly what are you looking into while you're in South Australia?
Well, the Environment and Energy Committee for the House of Representatives is conducting an inquiry into nuclear energy and its potential use in Australia. Obviously, I can't make official comment. I'm not the chair of the committee, but there are public hearings which have been held in Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide today and Perth tomorrow. And certainly there's been a very broad range of views, I've got to say.
What kind of views are being expressed in these committees?
Well, in terms of the public hearings, I mean, it's anything from people who are completely ideologically opposed through to those who think we should lift the prohibition and allow the market to decide what type of energy sources are utilised in Australia. So I think it's been valuable so far. We have said for a long period of time now that we want to have a conversation with the Australian people about what their views are, and we're certainly moving around the country to hear from them individually and certainly from representative businesses and companies.
You've been quite pro-nuclear power in the past. If this committee decides as a whole to not recommend the lifting of the prohibition, will you support that?
Oh, it's not a matter of whether I'm pro-nuclear or not. I'm completely technology agnostic. I'm all for things that work when it comes to energy production in this country, ensuring that we have a reliable and affordable supply of energy, and that includes gas and others. We need to ensure that it's our economy that strengthens and grows and creates more jobs. We have to be able to ensure we have affordable electricity for that to happen. Now, whether there's an option for nuclear energy, well, I guess we'll see, and I'm not going to preempt the outcomes of the inquiry. It's a bipartisan committee, and certainly there's been a lot of things which have been put forward which, to be perfectly frank, I wasn't aware of. The Lucas Heights reactor, the research reactor in Sydney, Australia produces 50% of the treated silicon for the world's supply, half. And this silicon is used in advanced computing and other types of technology. I certainly wasn't aware of that. Obviously, it produces nuclear isotopes for nuclear medicine and treatment of cancer. It's an incredibly important part of what happens in Australia, and I think that's incredibly valuable.
You have previously spoken about the benefits of nuclear power, though, and we've previously spoken about small mobile nuclear reactors that can produce a fair amount of energy. So you're saying you're not necessarily pro-nuclear power?
As I said, I've always been technology agnostic. If small modular reactors meet the economic needs, if they can be proven safe, if they can be used, well, that's the same as whether you build a dam for hydropower or a gas peaker or any other type. What really matters to the people I represent is that they can afford the electricity which they use in their homes and their businesses, and the Australian economy can continue to grow because we have an energy supply which is reliable, which is affordable, which helps us attract business from around the world.
Now, when it comes to the drought response in Australia, we had yesterday this discussion about the Moyne Shire in particular rejecting $1 million in funding because they're not in drought. The government insists it wasn't a mistake, but so surely if you've got a local government in an area with record rainfalls and they say no farmers being impacted by a lack of water, surely that's a mistake.
Well, if it has been incorrectly allocated, I mean, I've got a council which is drought declared, which was unsuccessful. I'm happy to take it off their hands for my local councils and local people, and they want to send us a cheque, well, as soon as they're ready. But when we're looking at the drought, I spoke to former Senator John Williams this morning. He's very close to Inverell, and he tells me that this is the worst in his memory. It's a very difficult position, and one of the really critical issues now is that we continue to ensure cash flow into those local towns and communities. Otherwise, they lose businesses, which means they lose population, and that is incredibly detrimental to regional Australia. So that's something we must focus on. We've got to ensure that those businesses have cash flow and continue into the future.
Are you confident the Drought Fund is being administered correctly if you've got Moyne Shire getting $1 million offered to it?
Oh, we've committed $7 billion, is my understanding, $100 million in the most recent announcement, and we've got to ensure that money, it's the rubber on the road. One of the challenges over recent years has been, the complaints that I've received have been about the very high level of paperwork and bureaucracy that was required in terms of the applications. Now, that's been fixed in my view, and we need to ensure that money is delivered, just as other social services and support is delivered around the country. And I think that is what's critical. We need to ensure we have cash flow into those communities, there's confidence, and one of the big hopes for them is that we build more infrastructure which will help them to be resilient into the future. And we really are struggling with some of the state governments, I've got to say.
When you say the rubber needs to hit the road, though, is it not hitting the road if it's going to councils that aren't in drought?
Oh, well, look, as I've said, if the council wants to send a cheque up to one of my drought-declared areas, I'm more than happy to accept it. If it's been issued incorrectly, well, I'm sure it'll be adjusted, and if not, it'll be delivered. That's entirely up to the shareholding ministers. But what I am saying is that we've got to get on with building infrastructure, particularly dams. We've got to give hope to regional people. We've got to ensure that they are confident into the future to maintain their businesses and stay on their farms. And right now, I have a Queensland Labor government which is knocking down the wall on one of my biggest dams locally, the Paradise Dam. They're claiming a safety issue, but they won't say what it is. They're saying they'll spend $100 million or up to $100 million to take 5 metres off the dam wall. That will reduce its capacity by 85,000 megalitres. And they're sending 110,000 megalitres down the river in the middle of a drought. I mean, I just can't understand it.
We've got the Victorian state government saying they're not building any more dams because of climate change. They won't fill up with water. Do you think it's a similar approach being taken in Queensland?
Well, I think the Victorian position is a complete nonsense. Of course it's going to rain. But I have seen comments recently from the Victorian Minister that they'll build dams for water supply to cities. Well, if you're building them for cities, well, you should be building them for agriculture and irrigation and growth. You have to be able to grow your economy. Agriculture is a very big part of what happens in Australia. Some $60 billion is our normal production in terms of agricultural production around the country. But in Queensland, we have a Labor government who's announced they're going to knock back the Rookwood Weir from 70-odd thousand megalitres to 54. They have not stated they'll reinstate the Paradise Dam wall to its original design capacity of 300,000 megalitres. This is a real problem. If we want to have growth into the future for my community and those other areas in Queensland, we have to build this infrastructure. But we've also got to maintain what we've got. You can't just go knocking down the wall of the local dam and expect growers to continue to invest in the local community.